Coming up, the New York Football Giants will look to unveil their new aerial attack with number one wide receiver Malik Nabers on the board, but he'll be going toe-to-toe statistically against Justin Jefferson, the established alpha of the position in the league. We break down how the defenses stack up on both sides, where the Giants can be successful, and if we believe Daniel Jones is ready to throw darts in week one. We dive in next. Yes, my friends, it is OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where you know that we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht. Over there, Andrew Mackowitz. We're healthy, wealthy, and wise, and breaking down the secondary, the wide receivers, the ways in which Big Blue gets a win on Sunday through the air, both on offense and then also defending against it on the other side. Andy, how are we on a Thursday?
Doing good. Adam, doesn't it feel like you just want to get to the game? Like we have obviously talked about this off the show. It's like we are fired up for Giants football, and just to like see the snaps, see the players play. Enough of the, is this guy our franchise quarterback? Do we have XYZ? You're going to see it all on the field on Sunday. There's no more talking about that. But in order for the Giants offense to be successful, a lot of things are going to have to happen, especially against the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, yeah, you better believe it, man. I mean, all this buildup, and especially we talk about Malik Nabers and finally having the number one wide receiver, seeing what Daniel Jones can do with that, seeing what the offense looks like without Saquon Barkley now, and we talked about Devin Singletary yesterday. It's like all of these elements, we've been talking about it, theorizing about it, and now Brian Daboll taking over play calling going into the year, right? So all these different things are very exciting. They're very tantalizing, but unlike, as we've talked about throughout the week, Minnesota's had some changes, but they also have some sample size in their background that you can look on and kind of think about what they'll be. The Giants don't really have that specifically on the offensive side of the ball. And then even defensively, we know new coordinator in Shane Bowen as well. So as we dive into how the Giants are going to be successful, I mentioned Brian Daboll and taking over play calling. I did want to offer this little historical nugget, Andrew. Back in 2019, Buffalo Bills, Stephon Diggs, had 39 pass plays of 20-plus yards. How many do you think they had the following year when they added Diggs?
51.
63. They had 63 pass plays of 20-plus yards in 2020. Now, 20 of those went to Diggs, so it's not like he came in. You're talking about going from 39 to 63. Quick math, that's 24 more. Almost all of them were one-to-one for Diggs, but it also helps open up the offense for other players as well, as we know. So the interesting thing I thought about was, like, from a Brian Daboll and his mentality as an offensive coordinator and now a head coach play calling for Big Blue, what is it going to look like to carry it over? Back in 2022 for the New York Football Giants, that sweet, beautiful playoff run they had a league-low 43 pass plays of 20-plus yards or more. And Jones was, you go back to 2022 in that season, 10 of 33 on 20-plus yard plays, so that's only 30% completion rate, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in 2022. But the New York Football Giants also had the worst drop total, at 20, which is 1 every 16 passes. So just on its surface, what do you take away from the fact that Daniel Jones, in theory, was not so great in 2022 throwing the ball deep, but also the wide receiver room was terrible at it? They didn't do it a ton. Now you have Malik Nabers, a guy you think, hey, if I'm going for it, he's going to be a guy that's going to pull them down more often than not.
Well, Adam, you were really astute on this one, picking up like, well, let's go back. Don't you love when I compliment you, by the way? Isn't that nice? You're like, well,
it never hurts.
Which is it this time? Is it my good looks? Is it my intelligence? What are we talking about here?
Is it my fashion sense?
You went back and said, okay, let's go look at what happened with Brian Daboll potentially calling plays with Josh Allen and what happened when they actually got a bona fide number one wide receiver. You mentioned the big plays. Obviously, that's been a focal point this offseason, and we hope to see more of them. We pray that we have more of them than we did last year. But just look at what happened to Josh Allen, the player, when he got someone like Stephon Diggs. And no, Daniel Jones is not Josh Allen. But Daniel Jones is big in terms of size-wise. He is relatively athletic like Josh Allen. So to be able to see that they both do have Brian Daboll calling plays, you can at least draw a few correlations to it. And did you know, Adam,
Yeah,
in
Devin
2019.
Singletary as a running back, he was there once
Yeah,
upon a
yeah,
time.
Devin Singletary getting the whole band back. Joe Shame's going out to lunch with all them. Like
That's right.
everyone's there at this point. When you look at Josh Allen in 2019, he only had a 58% completion percentage, threw for 3,000 yards and about a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. His quarterback rating was an 85.3. Adam, do you know what Daniel Jones's career quarterback rating is?
Isn't it like spot on like an 80? It's like an 85 point.
It's an
Well,
85.2.
Ooh.
Literally, it's
Eight.
almost the exact same number that Josh Allen had. And when you look at what the impact of getting Stephon Diggs did, obviously there was other factors, but clearly getting a number one wide receiver changed things for Josh Allen. He ended up going from 58% completion percentage to 69, from 3,000 yards to 4,500, a 3.5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and 107 passer rating. Adam, everything exploded for Josh Allen to become the player that he is by getting that number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
And to show you that it's not just Stephon Diggs helping Josh Allen and vice versa. Stephon Diggs, before he left the Minnesota Vikings, had 2 back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. In 2020, he had 1,500 yards and had 8 touchdowns. He was unbelievable with the Bills. His yards per reception went down, but he just had more yards, and he went from 63 receptions with the Vikings to 127. Adam, it's tremendous how like Josh Allen made Stephon Diggs better and Stephon Diggs made Josh Allen better. Could Malik Nabers have the same impact on Daniel Jones, even if it's to a lesser degree, right?
You talk about that 120 plus receptions and the 1,500 plus yards for Stephon Diggs that year. And I thought about it too, because you looked at his number. I think he's under 12 yards per catch in that season. So we talked about this when I was predicting what I thought for Malik Nabers this year. I think he'll have explosive plays, but I think it's actually going to be as much about the volume as it is about hitting some of those home runs. So, am I going to sit here and tell you 127 catching, 1,500 yards for Malik Nabers? No, like in his rookie year, that'd be pretty darn impressive, though. I take it if it happens, but I think a version of that is possible here, and that's what should get you excited coming into this week 1 matchup, as we're going to turn over here in a second to what does Brian Flores as the defensive coordinator like to do for the Vikings? How are the Giants going to break that down? But just on spec, when you say you now have that number one wide receiver, and let's say at times the offensive line protections break down and you just got to chuck it up and hope. Listen, we respect, we believe in Darius Slayton as a valuable member of a receiving corps, but he's not Malik Nabers. And that's not the guy that you want to toss a 50-50 ball up to and say, hey, man, go earn it for me. And we already saw over the course of this offseason, Malik Nabers make some of those plays and also give some of those quotes of, yeah, that's my job. You put the ball up and I go get the ball. I go make you look good. I make your job easier. So coming up here in a second, let's talk about what the Minnesota Vikings defense did a year ago in terms of how they like to scheme and whether or not we think the Giants are going to be capable with Daniel Jones of breaking that down early and often on Sunday and helping this team be explosive on that side of the football. We'll dive into it in just one moment. Before we do, my friends, let you know that our sponsor of today's show is Pietential, Pietential. That's Pietential.com. It's an online free assessment tool for individual users. You go ahead and set a baseline for your well-being, tools to improve over time, and also track your progress. It's a great way to approach, let's say, a new year, NFL season, and make sure that you're doing the best version of you. Check out Pietential.com today. Okay, when we turn our attention over to, we got Malik Nabers. I believe very much in Wan'Dale Robinson, but I have an interesting question when it comes to him against this Vikings defense. Jalen Hyatt, looks like Darius Slayton is still going to make him earn that third wide receiver position. And obviously, even we can extend this to the running back room and how players are going to be utilized. Interesting note that primarily when we talk about in 2023, Brian Flores was a guy that likes to run zone and off zone coverages. He likes to put his front up and near the line of scrimmage. He likes to force quarterbacks to have to make quick throws, get the ball out of their hands, and then allow that zone scheme to swarm to those areas and bring down receivers, bring down running backs out of the backfield. This is actually an interesting one because before I talk about how the wide receivers have success or Daniel Jones has success, do you have any concern about our Mr. Consistency, give me 3 to 4 yards every single carry, Devin Singletary, and Minnesota saying, yeah, our front's going to go ahead and get up there in the box on you, and we're going to see if you can break through that line and maybe force the Giants to consider using some 12 personnel, which is going to mitigate having the spread out options and having more receivers out there in those plays.
You know, it's a good question. The fact that Devin Singletary always stays in front of down and distance, at least gaining a few yards, to me is what's important for the Giants offense to get going. To be honest with you, the Giants offensive line is also so vastly improved, in my opinion, from where it was last year and even the year before that.
Give me the fall forward, right? Give me the fall forward yards on first down.
Yeah, I start to feel confident that like maybe our offensive line can impose their will and actually move the line of scrimmage. I have not felt that over the last few seasons. And so when we start thinking about it, this could be a scenario where the Giants start running the ball and say, we're going to do this until you stop us. So while Brian Daboll might want to be able to air it out after we mentioned all of the comparisons of adding Stephon Diggs to Josh Allen, like if the Giants can have a functional offense and move the ball with Devin Singletary, they're going to just continue to run the ball until they bring another person in the box and open up the passing game. So for me, I'm just very excited to see who wins the line of scrimmage because the preseason has had some pretty good returns for this Giants offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's the sample size that you look at and want to love, right? You go back to the first couple of preseason games where you said, wow, look at these easy holes to break up. Now, you go through the second and third preseason game, some of the starting offensive linemen aren't out there, looks a little bit clunky, kind of slows down a little. I think that the early sample size is what you're hanging your hat on here when you have Runyon, JMS obviously in the middle, and then having Van Roten just specifically in at the point of attack in the middle of that offensive line, let alone getting out to the edge. And I think there's probably a conversation to be had maybe on our Friday final preview show about supplemental players when it comes to the running back room and how they're going to contribute. But I agree with you. Like, I think, I always hate using analogies, but the idea of like a boxer, jab, jab, and then throw your uppercut, jab, jab, and then lay a big hook. Like if you're the Giants and Singletary says, thanks for 3-4 yards, thanks for 3-4 yards. And then we go ahead and we try to take that shot. And honestly, I'm fine if, while I know fans are going to want to see it, and then so do I'm okay with if you just grind your way to a first down on the opening series on run play, like to establish, hey, we have this in our identity. We want to be explosive, but we'll go ahead and start it here. And from a defensive, standpoint for the Vikings, it's sending a message to Flores like, hey, you want to sit back in the zone and swarm? You're going to have to keep creeping down. And then we do feel like we have the weapons to try to expose you over the top at times.
Yeah, and Adam, it's the delicate balance though, because
then it's 3rd and 7, and you're like, wait, what happened?
I know. I will be at the stadium in the season tickets that I have, and I will be cheering. And I already know that if the Giants run it into the line twice, and it's 3rd and 9, and Daniel Jones either gets sacked or throws a ball over Malik Nabers' head, that you know exactly what's going to happen. Everyone is going to boo. And so, do you think that factors in at all? Of like, we know that the team has to get off to a good start. And like play calling is so important with Brian Daboll. Do you think he's thinking like, we can't go 3 and out? How do we figure out 3 plays that get us a first down? Or is he thinking like, let's establish the run? Is he thinking we have to take a shot with Malik Nabers? Like, where would your head be at in terms of how they should be calling that play?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you want to, whatever's going to get you the results you need, right? Moving the football, having success. I think it's important. Now, I will say, from a Daniel Jones perspective, wasn't a great sample, came off the injury, very limited reps in live football in the preseason. So I think it's important also to kind of get him into his rhythm early. So this is, again, talking about Flores and breaking down that scheme. Okay, because let's get into that side of it, because this does dictate about success. Do I want the immediate quick 3-step drop out of your hands and into Malik Nabers on an in route, a nice little slant? Of course I do. Get the ball in his hands. Let Gilmore line up across from him on the outside and be like, yeah, I'm going to break you down. Do I like the idea that Wan'Dale Robinson has versatility, as does Malik Nabers, by the way? One of the things that I think is different this year, obviously, in addition to having a number 1 now, is that Darius Slayton is not as versatile in terms of formation lineups. Jalen Hyatt, even though he may, one of his problems like route running and getting that under his belt. So how is he going to position? Wan'Dale Robinson was a guy. They moved him all around the formation a year ago. They moved him into the backfield at times. Malik Nabers can line up in the slot on the outside, give him end arounds. We saw a little sample of that in the preseason. So I like the idea that you bring in a second weapon offensively that you can move around and get the matchups you want on a down and distance scenario, because that's, I think, key to breaking down a soft zone, waiting for you to make the play, dictating terms, and then jumping routes. Well, it's going to be a lot harder if we can get into our plus matchups more often than not. So I like the idea of knowing that Singletary is Mr. Consistency. I'm fine if 1st and 10. I mean, all right, let's take a little step back here for a second. Wouldn't everybody love if the first play, Giants, the coin flip, they choose to receive, and it's just Daniel Jones drop back, Malik Nabers down the sideline. Let's go. Just bomb. And I don't care. Catch, no catch, or otherwise. I think that would actually get the stadium up and energized if Brian Daboll walked out and said, yeah, guess what? This is what you're going to see today. This is going to be the threat for you to send a clear message to the Vikings defense. Get prepared to back off. And then 2nd down, you hand it off to Singletary.
I mean, of course, that's the reason why I asked you the question, because it does feel like after
there's nothing sexy about a 3-yard run on the first play.
Offense hasn't been explosive. Just get the explosive play out of the way. I don't know necessarily if that's gonna be the way that they go. It certainly would get the fans going. But yes. Adam, I am interested to see how early they get Malik Nabers involved. You saw in the preseason game against the Texans, they telegraphed the fact that they wanted to get Malik Nabers the ball in the first play, and it was almost a pick 6 the other direction. So the Giants do have to be careful. There is the idea you want to get him involved early, but you don't want to telegraph every single play that you're going to make it harder on the offense to actually function and move down the field. So
let me ask you the question on that point, because this is where I think, obviously you want to. So we know they brought in Gilmore for the Vikings. We know that you're going to try. I mean, listen, here's the difference of not having a number 1 wide receiver. It's a great problem to have. The other team is going to say, just like the Giants are going to with Justin Jefferson, this is the number 1 problem that we need to address. I guarantee you that the Vikings are going to try to do a lot of things like the Giants will with Justin Jefferson to take Malik Nabers out of the play and out of the game. And that's why I bring up Wan'Dale Robinson again. If you want to throw that ball early, there's just this world, and we saw it last year. You get the ball into Wan'Dale Robinson's hands. He is certainly elusive. He can certainly make extra yards after the catch. I find this interesting dynamic early in this game. When they drop back to pass, it's going to be as much about whoever else is out there on the field as it is about Malik Nabers, because you know for a fact, if you're a road team, you want to come in. That's your number 1. Let's see how long it takes you to get on the ball. Let's see if it takes you the first series, the second series, because now you start to build up that frustration and you try to get Jones, try to get the Giants to force that ball in there. So I think Wan'Dale Robinson is very interesting in the early portions of this game. And I think jet sweeps, end arounds, and unique ways to get Malik Nabers that first touch is going to be critical for Brian Daboll. I think he's going to find a way to make sure that Malik Nabers touches that ball within the first 4 offensive plays for the Giants.
Last question on the offensive side for the Giants.
Please.
Who do you think is going to get more playing time as the 3rd wide receiver? Do you believe it's going to be Jalen Hyatt, or do you believe it's going to be Darius Slayton, or do you literally think it's going to be a 50-50 split?
I think more reps will go to Darius Slayton in this week 1 game, but I think that when it comes to some more dynamic route combinations, we may see Jalen Hyatt get introduced for those type of sets. Frankly, 4 wide receiver sets, that may be Jalen Hyatt's opportunity to shine. But at this point, I mean, you saw it, I think it was last off season, right? Or it was in season, where it's Brian Daboll, and he's like, hey, man, remember last year dropping balls all over the place? Look at you now. To Darius Slayton. He's come back around, and he certainly has offered some consistency. So I don't want to downplay a guy that was giving you 700+ yards year over year. His job gets easier now. He is not facing a number 1 cornerback anymore. He's facing the 2nd best cornerback. And that's the last note here on this side of it. We talk about obviously having Gilmore. We talk about Byron Murphy. I wanted to just give these numbers because he's kind of a versatile player, most likely playing in that nickel spot there. He played a +19 coverage rating. He had 3 interceptions, 13 pass deflections, 61 catches on 92 targets. Went out with a grade 3 MCL sprain, was supposed to be coming back in healthy. You have Shaquille Griffin there now. He's another player that has done some things in his career, has defended 64 pass defenses over 74 careers, 7 interceptions over his career as well. I think he's more of the gambler type of player. But these are matchups that the Giants are going to have to win early to start to break up what the defense is looking to do, start to get them out of these zone looks, and then expose the middle of that field for some things underneath and for the running game as well.
I agree with you in terms of the Slayton Hyatt thing. What I think is going to be interesting, and we talked about the offensive line. It always goes back to the offensive line. If the Giants can protect Daniel Jones, I actually expect to see Jalen Hyatt more often than not. It's
More time means bigger routes. Yeah.
Right. So it'll be very telling early how the Giants offensive line looks in terms of giving Daniel Jones time. If there's no time, then you go to the veteran trusty guy that can maybe run a couple more routes inside or some short curls or things like that to get him more involved. If the offensive line looks better and gives Daniel Jones time, expect to see a lot more Jalen Hyatt going vertical and stretching the field, which just opens up everything for guys like Bellinger, Johnson, Wan'Dale, etc. But yeah, to me, it's all about the offensive line. What are they going to do? Are they going to impose their will? Are they going to be pushed back? That's really what the Giants fans have been wondering, all this offseason. Have we improved enough to have a functional offense?
Since the dawn of time. Coming up here in a second, we flip it over. There's a guy, I don't know if you heard of him. His name's Justin Jefferson. He's probably someone the Giants are going to want to keep an eye on. What is the secondary going to do under new defensive coordinator Shane Bowen to disrupt the offensive rhythm for Sam Darnold and this Vikings attack? We mentioned Aaron Jones the other day. We dive in on slowing down Minnesota coming up next. As we turn our attention over, Andy, just one more note here on the offensive side, because I mentioned those 20-plus yard plays for the New York Football Giants. In just 6 games a year ago, behind that very bad offensive line, Daniel Jones was 2 of 13. He threw 13 in the first 6 games, so they would have projected to probably come close to or move past the year prior's numbers, but just 2 completions on those. Had an interception, obviously, before he went out, but I think the big factor here, offensive line play, give him time. And you're really touched on a good point of the more time he has is the deeper these routes can become. And that's where Jalen Hyatt can certainly shine. Justin Jefferson, he goes by JJ. I've heard a rumor that he wants to change his nickname to Jets, but I don't care. JJ, Justin Jefferson, is obviously the #1 threat here for Minnesota. Had an injury a year ago. My biggest concern, beyond him being the best wide receiver in the NFL today, is that the Giants obviously have Deonte Banks. That's going to be a tough assignment no matter who you are. But the Giants are not built to provide over-the-top help in coverage from a safety position. They are not coverage safeties between Pinnock and Belton and even Tyler Nubin. How concerned are you about that matchup before we talk about the way you prevent those deep routes from developing for Minnesota?
Well, Justin Jefferson is the type of player that you have to obviously game plan for, but he's the focal point. We need to make sure where he is at all times. There's only 10 to 15 of those players in the entire NFL. He's obviously one of the top players in that regard. Adam, the Giants have played Justin Jefferson a few times in 2022. And in the playoff game, they obviously were very good against Justin Jefferson. He had 7 catches only for 47 yards, 6.7 yards per catch. Obviously, like a very, very low number for Justin Jefferson. It's why the Giants were able to win. In the game earlier in the season, the Giants lost against Justin Jefferson. He had 16 targets, 12 catches, 133 yards, and a touchdown. That is the problem that Justin Jefferson presents. Now, when you think about Wink Martindale's scheme versus Shane Bowen's scheme, it's complete apples and oranges. Wink Martindale wants them to get the ball out fast with creative blitz packages so that Justin Jefferson can't be the explosive deep route, where Shane Bowen kind of sits back and says, we need to win one-on-one matchups, especially along the defensive line. And we're going to have our secondary, our linebackers kind of drop into quarters, and we're going to try to play a little bit more in front of us. It's a different aggressive style, saying we got to beat people one-on-one rather than sending the blitz. I look at this like, I don't think Deonte Banks is going to be lined up alongside Justin Jefferson. I think Deonte Banks needs to be lined up against Jordan Addison on the other side. And I would tend to just double with safety help over the top, Justin Jefferson's side of the field anytime I can, because I don't think that there's a guy in the Giants secondary that can handle Justin Jefferson one-on-one, even if there is pressure from the defensive line. I think you have to make it a focal point to have someone over the top at all times. So you may as well have Nick McLeod, Cordell Flott, Adoree Jackson with some help over him, and let Deonte Banks say, I can handle Jordan Addison a little bit more by myself, focus on the other side of the field.
That's interesting. I mean, oftentimes we talk about, we heard this from Sauce Gardner, right? Like, I want to follow the #1 wide receiver anywhere that he goes on the field. That's my job, and battled really to against the defensive structure to want to do that. And there were some sample sizes suggested the Jets should have done that more often. But listen, we know Deonte Banks is still coming to year #2. It's not like he's an elite shutdown corner right now. We believe in the next step. It's interesting because if you set up that way, I can understand the premise of Tay Banks, go shut down Addison. He never sees the ball. And we know that Justin Jefferson is elite. We know we're going to try to scheme ways to figure that out. How much would you anticipate then if you want to go that way? Justin Jefferson, they're moving him around the formation. They're bringing him from the left side over to the right. They're putting him into the slot. They're trying to free him up. As that shift happens, though, are you is everyone following? Are you passing it off? Because I think at some point you're just going to end up getting into those matchups, which is fine if Tay Banks gets put onto that assignment. But I think you're saying just live with the results, what they're going to be, and just set the premise. A safety, a spy is always going to be living there. Any world where you're talking about, because it's so hard to me, again, based on skill sets, it's like 3 high safeties. I don't know if that's the best way to go here, to have the extra spy on the field to track Justin Jefferson, because it still means that you're then taking away one more opportunity in and around the box. And then we talk about a player that I maybe was a little soft on giving respect to in Aaron Jones. And now you go down to the trenches and you try to trust your defensive front.
Well, so I'll flip it for you and let me know how you think about this. If you are the Minnesota Vikings defending Malik Nabers and you signed Stephon Gilmore to a 1-year, $7-8 million deal, not necessarily number 1 corner money, but they really didn't have any other option. Are you saying, Stephon Gilmore, we're going to put you one-on-one against Malik Nabers and you just need to win all those battles? Or do you think it would be a mistake for Minnesota to just say, he's our best corner, so let's put our best corner against their best player one-on-one? It's like you're almost doing yourself a disservice by just saying, like, I think Malik Nabers at this point in his career is a better player than Stephon Gilmore. And I think if you were to put them one-on-one against each other, eventually Malik's athleticism and explosiveness is going to get to him. I think the same thing of Justin Jefferson being a better player today than Deontay Banks is. So how many times can you just kind of leave him out there and say, let's put our best corner against our best corner? That's kind of where my mind goes.
Well, the premise really is I mean, I'll flip your flip on a flip. The Vikings want to work some zone and off zone coverages. If I'm the Giants, I maybe want to work some zone coverages here, right? Yeah. I want to tell my safeties, listen, you got to be ready to move and shift with this. But in a lot of ways, so I wonder if both teams end up saying the same thing. We're not really, you want to move and you want to shift them. Now, we know the trick of that is when you start moving wide receivers around the formation and you don't see cornerbacks travel with them, quarterback knows, okay, we're talking about a zone look here. What is going to be my hot route that I want to go to? Something underneath. Maybe it's going to be the running back coming out of the backfield or the right route combination with your number 1. So there's a lot of things that get signaled inside of that. But I do wonder if really both these teams are going to come out and go, shell coverage. We're going to, keep it in front of us. Don't let anyone beat us deep. And then we get to what I think is obviously, I mean, I don't think it, I know it. The strength of the New York Football Giants defense is going to be that front. And if this, I think, is one of the kind of hang in the balance kind of things about this game, if we assume, like you talked about 2 seasons ago, and some of those numbers for Justin Jefferson against the Giants, listen, you want to have 8, 9, 12, have 15 catches. If it's only for 60 or 70 yards, like, we're winning that battle overall. So I need to know that Dexter Lawrence, that Kayvon Thibodeau, that Brian Burns, that Bobby Okereke can take a player like Aaron Jones and first say, you shall not pass. You are not breaking off those home runs. Like, I think if you talk about Aaron Jones having 2 or 3 significant 10-plus yard runs in this game, especially early, that's a problem. That means that you are opening things up. You're starting to creep down a little bit, sending a rookie like Tyler Nubin down in towards the box, and you end up exposing yourself deep. I wonder how long the Giants would stick with that mentality. But frankly, the goal has to be front and center. It doesn't happen. We do not let Aaron Jones start to turn and dictate to us how we have to adjust our defensive scheme. That front needs to win, needs to control the run game in a big way early in this one.
I mean, Shane Bowen's system with the Tennessee Titans was, you can't run on us. Like, we have bodies up front. We're going to make it uncomfortable for you, and we're going to get pressure sending less people than you are going to send normally on your defensive side of the ball. Adam, if the Giants can't stop the run, this game will get out of hand very quickly, because then you're talking about Bobby Okereke having to move up, and all of a sudden there's way more space for explosive wide receivers to be able to operate. For me, that front has to make them one-dimensional. There's not even a question. I don't believe the Giants are equipped enough yet to win a shootout against a team like the Minnesota Vikings, and that's what it feels like it turns into if guys like Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau and Nunez Roche, they can't get pressure just with that front alone. And so I'm looking at this saying, I haven't even put it in my brain as a possibility that Aaron Jones is going to run for 100 yards, because that world means the Giants do not have any chance of winning this game. They have to have Sam Darnold, who is what I consider an inaccurate thrower of the football, drop back as many times as possible to give that young secondary an opportunity where, like, I don't think he's a world, killer, when he's dropping back to pass. So for me, I'm sure that you feel the same way, and maybe I'm just speaking what everyone else knows, but the Giants hang their hat on the defensive front. They have to stop the run. Without that, I feel like it would be a long day at the office for the Giants.
I think it's one of the things that we'll drill down on in our final preview on Friday. It's the idea of, hey, man, if this is all kind of looking similar on both sides of the football and how you want to approach things, boy, I mean, it's not often we'll say this throughout the year, but I'll trust a player in Daniel Jones who, for all of his shortcomings or issues that he's pretty accurate. His completion percentage has always been pretty good. I know it's a risk, but like, I'll take that over what Sam Darnold has put on tape so far. And while I think he's going to have a better year in Minnesota because it's a better team overall and just a better situation for him, and having Justin Jefferson doesn't hurt, but I think it's a similar kind of thing of like, hey, let's test him early too, because he's not necessarily the mobile quarterback that we associate Daniel Jones being. So there's going to be some push and pull there. It obviously starts up front. We talked about that with both of these offensive lines. So it's going to be a fascinating battle to watch here, and how teams adjust, something that we'll talk about a little bit deeper when it comes to our final preview on Friday. But before we go, Andy, there's also something else that's happening on a Thursday. It's the start of the NFL football season.
It's
officially.
Back,
football is back, baby. And they're going to open it up with the Super Bowl champs, Kansas City Chiefs, hosting the Baltimore Ravens. That's a fun matchup, especially when you think about what Baltimore's expectations are. Where do you stand on this matchup? This is the first time Andy gets to touch into his betting corner and give us the line, talk about how he likes it and which way it goes.
Yeah, so right now, Kansas City obviously hosting Baltimore and the Ravens. The Kansas City Chiefs are -3, and the over-under is 47 points. Now, listen, Kansas City's going to be hanging the banner. They're going to be all excited about how last year went. They've obviously retooled, and I think that Kansas City is in a really good position to obviously go for a three-peat, which has never been done in the Super Bowl era.
That's right.
You know what? This is one of those where I'm just kind of curious, like, who has more to play for in this game? Like, it feels like if Kansas City wins this game, Baltimore's got to look around and be like, are we ever going to beat these guys? Like, they have a whole new wide receiving core. This is game one. Like, we need to do it. No L'Jarius Sneed. Like,
but Andy, you don't go against Kansas City. You don't go against Patty Mahomes.
I don't in the playoffs for sure. I mean, let's make that clear. This is one of those things where, listen, Kansas City lost in the first game to the Detroit Lions, and everyone was like, whoa, what happened? The game clearly didn't matter that much for Kansas City. It mattered a whole heck of a lot for the Lions, because that was like vaulting the Lions into where we think they are, which is a top 4 competitor in the NFC. It feels like Baltimore needs this game more than Kansas City. I kind of look at it and say the addition of Derrick Henry has to be able to help them. Like, is Kansas City going to be able to hurt that rushing attack? For me, I like getting the 3 points with Baltimore. And I just think at this point in the season, it feels like, if this was a January game, I'd be picking Kansas City. Week 1, give me the Baltimore Ravens getting 3, because I just think they need this game for their confidence more than the Chiefs do.
Gosh darn it, I wish, as we'll be picking Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night games throughout the year, in addition to some other host battle picks that we'll be doing. I wish I could disagree with you, but I don't. I think this is an important game for Baltimore. It's kind of your point. Kansas City, the season's the season. We kind of figure out some things, and we do a little dance, and then by the end of it, we go to the playoffs and we win championships. For Baltimore, you're coming off an ugly playoff exit a year ago, too. You have tweaked some things. Zay Flowers needs to kind of atone for himself. And I think Derrick Henry is fascinating. If you pull up what his rushing over-under is for this game, I'd be fascinated to hear that number. I will take Baltimore. I will take the 3 points here. Kansas City, a Super Bowl loss to start their new season. The hangover, as they always say. And I'll even take the over. If I was going to put a number on it, I might say something like 27-23 Baltimore. Maybe that's a little bit high, but I'll take the over at 47. 47 even there as that set piece. And then Derrick Henry, what are we talking about?
Derrick Henry over under 65.5 yards.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over on Derrick Henry as well, because I'm talking about, listen, we know he left Tennessee. He's still the king. One sideline run where this dude and all 200, maybe even 340 pounds of him, I think they misquote what his weight truly is, stiff arming dudes out of his life. I think there's one big run in this game for Derrick Henry that kind of gets that Baltimore fan base excited on the road.
I will take Lamar Jackson's over rushing yards as my little thing. I think that they are going to focus on Derrick Henry. He's never had a running back in his, Lamar Jackson's never had a running back like Derrick Henry behind him. Yeah. It's been Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Justice Hill, whoever you pull off the street that doesn't really instill fear in anyone. I think King Henry does that. Imagine one of those naked bootlegs where it looks like you're handing it off to Derrick Henry and all of a sudden Lamar Jackson's got space for days in front of him. I feel like Lamar needs to prove himself, show that loss in the playoffs was not on him, and this is not what he's going to be moving forward. 48.5 yards feels like he breaks off a 30-yard run at some point in the game. But yeah, we both feel the same way about Baltimore needing the game more. There's a sense of urgency there because we just saw what happened to the Chiefs last year. They lost the first game and then come back and win the Super Bowl. So to me, give me the team that needs it more, the Baltimore Ravens. Football's back, baby.
A first official head-to-head host pick battle in the books, although we agree. So we'll just keep an eye on some of the extra fantasy details. Tomorrow on the show, we talk about the New York Football Giants' final betting line. We talk about injury updates and reports. What's the status of Tyrone Tracy Jr.? I got a little conversation to have about him, even in week 1. Cordell Flott, the secondary, right? Being healthy and ready to go. Who we think the big performers are going to be, stat predictions, game predictions, and so much more. So be sure to be a part of that as well. You get us in the meantime over on YouTube at One Giant Podcast, on the podcast feed. Go find us, One Giant Podcast, download it, turn on the alerts, give a review if you can. Check out our sponsors as well. And until tomorrow, until the next time, until the best times. As Andrew Makowitz would want, nay, and need with the return of football, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.